With me here on set now is journalist Megan Clement. She edits Impact. It's a bilingual newsletter covering feminist movements and women's rights. Thanks ever so much for coming in and talking to us today. We don't know the sentence yet, but he has been found guilty. Give us, first of all, your reaction to that.
I mean, it's no surprise. Dominique Pelicot said very early on in the trial, I am a rapist. He has never hidden his crimes since they were discovered. And the enormity of them, the fact that he invited at least 50 other men to rape his wife, means that it's absolutely no surprise that he's been found guilty of aggravated rape. I think what's going to be interesting is how long he's given and what will become of the other 50 defendants, many of whom say they're not guilty.
What is needed, do you think? What are you hoping for from the judgments handed down today?
I think what a lot of people are hoping for today is a bit of justice and a bit of peace for Gisele Pelicot, who has been through hell. And has been so incredibly brave in holding this open trial, in saying repeatedly, the shame must change sides. I have not done anything wrong. It is for these people to have shame, not for me. So I think what we're hoping for is that this is what has happened to Gisele Pelicot is taken seriously, and that the sentences reflect that.
I mean, from what we're seeing here, from the amount of coverage it's had, not just here in France, but right around the world, I mean, the case is obviously being taken seriously, but presumably that needs to filter through to actually make a difference in the longer term.
It really does, and that's what she has said has been her goal from the beginning, is to spark this conversation in France and beyond about rape, about the banality of rape, as she has called it, and also to change the way victims are treated. It's been grueling watching her go through this open trial. And she has said, I understand why people don't come forward with accusations of rape, because this is very, very, very difficult for victims. So I think a lot of people agree that something has to change for the way that victims of rape are taken care of in our society.
Do you think it will make a difference? I mean, that coverage that we've had, the way that it's been portrayed and covered in newspapers and TV channels across the world?
I think it already has. This trial, it should have, it seemed like it was going to be this kind of awful media feeding frenzy, a really kind of unpleasant spectacle. And in one sense it has been, but what's been remarkable about Gisele Pelicot is she has taken this moment and turned it into a real kind of masterclass of dignity. And she's given a lot of people hope. She's made a lot of victims feel seen, feel understood, and feel like they have a voice in her. So already she's done a lot. Whether we will see, for example, a change in the law here in France, whether we will see, for example, the notion of consent inscribed in rape laws, that remains to be seen. But I think in terms of public attitudes, she has made changes in this society that others have failed to do in the past. It's really quite remarkable what she's done.
A phrase you use there, seen and understood. I was talking with my guest in the last half hour, saying it's yes, of course it's about that, but it's also about making sure that women are actually believed.
Absolutely. And I think Gisele Pelicot has been believed, and we have to think about why she's been believed. I mean,
but isn't that that's sort of because the evidence has been
exactly
to prove it? Without that evidence, how do you ensure women are believed?
Well, it's very difficult at the moment. You're right in that there were just hundreds of hours of evidence of these awful crimes being committed against Gisele Pelicot that police found on Dominique Pelicot's laptop. And not all victims have that. Most do not. But even with all of this evidence, I think it's very notable if you've seen the way the defense lawyers have defended their clients. They have implied that perhaps she was an exhibitionist, that perhaps she really was participating, even though, in many of the videos she's snoring. So, yeah, even with that kind of wealth of evidence, it's still hard for people to believe victims of rape and sexual violence. I think what's really important to know, and what Gisele Pelicot has shown, is there is very little to be gained from coming forward with these kind of with accusations or with your stories of sexual assault. And I think that's one of the rape myths that's very prevalent in society that Gisele Pelicot has helped to kind of push back against.
What do you think about her and her courage and what she's achieved over the last few months?
Well, there's one thing that I disagree with Gisele Pelicot over. She says she's not brave. She's extraordinarily brave. Her courage is astonishing. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that she is an icon, a feminist icon, an explicitly feminist icon at a time when we are seeing a great backlash against feminism around the world. We've never needed a Gisele Pelicot more than we have right now. And she has been extraordinary. She has very, very clearly, very, very patiently just kind of pursued her message. She said, the shame must change sides. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. And people have agreed. That's remarkable. She's an incredible woman.
And what do you think about her and her future now? I mean, is she going to be able to get back to some kind of normal life?
I would like Gisele Pelicot to have a measure of peace. She's been through hell, and she says it herself. She said she's a field of ruin. I mean, we can only imagine what it's like to discover something like that has been happening to you. So I really hope that Gisele Pelicot, she's made an enormous contribution to French society. I really hope she's now just left alone to live her life the best she can.
And I'm sure that she is getting a lot of help. What kind of help can be given to her, do you think?
She's a victim of extreme trauma, and she said she's receiving psychological help. That is essential in the way that that victims need to be looked after facts like this. So yes, you can't comment on someone's psychological state, but you would hope that there is a full range of services available to her, and also to less high-profile victims of sexual assault in this country.
Just hearing from the court, in fact, we're just hearing in the last few moments at least 20 other defendants in the Pelicot rape trial have been found guilty of rape. That indicates that some of them haven't, I assume.
Yeah, we'll see. There was a minority that were not accused of rape. There was at least one accused of the lesser charge of sexual assault. It's tricky. Rape law is tricky in this country. You need to prove that there was violence, surprise, threat, or coercion involved. We don't have the notion of consent inscribed in the law here. That may change, and that's something that Gisele Pelicot has pointed out herself. She said, at what point did I consent to this? But it hasn't really been a question of consent. So we'll see. It's a lot of defendants, and as I mentioned, Dominique Pelicot is pretty cut and dried with the others. We have to see what the court will say.
The actual process of when a complaint is made, what happens, if you like? I mean, obviously, somebody will sit down with a police officer and explain what has happened to them. But where is it taken from there, and who decides whether there's enough evidence for the proceedings to happen?
Well, it's a great question, because 94% of reported cases of rape in this country are dropped by prosecutors. That can be for a range of reasons, including lack of evidence. But that is huge. So only 6% of people who come forward with rape allegations, and we know for a fact that it is a very small percentage of people who actually feel safe enough to do that. So only 6% of those even make it to a point where we would see what we've seen with the Gisele Pelicot trial. So I mean, feminists say that rape is essentially decriminalized in this country, and I think what's important to remember about the Pelicot trial is it's very much the exception and not the rule.
And what's the problem behind that? I mean, is part of it that there's such a male dominance in the police force, for example? Is that one of the difficulties?
I mean, the problem is the male domination in society, I think, but that's probably a bit too broad. Yes, there are issues with the way that victims are received by police forces. There have been efforts to change that. It's very much a postcard lottery in France. Where you go and make your complaint will depend on how you are kind of taken care of. For example, if you go to somewhere to like the Maison des Femmes, the House of Women in Seine-Saint-Denis, where I live, this is designed to respond to the needs of women and to respond to the needs of victims of sexual violence. It may not be the same if you're in Limoges or another part of the country. So part of the problem is there's a real lack of consistency in services. There's a real lack of budget. Feminist organizations for years have been calling for France to take a similar approach to Spain, where they've invested billions in addressing gender-based violence. Emmanuel Macron has said that gender equality is the grand cause of his presidency, but we haven't seen the same level of investment. And I think until we do, it's going to be very, very difficult for rape victims in this country.
Do you think it's made much difference in the minds of men? I mean, obviously people are shocked by this case, but has it made people perhaps look at themselves, perhaps look at situations around them, even just think about a little bit more the way men talk to women, that kind of thing. Even it's much smaller scale, of course, but that's important, isn't it? It's like the grassroots of where everything comes from.
There's absolutely a continuum of behavior, and it is important the way these kind of everyday interactions do feed into wider problems of sexual violence. I think you're entirely right. And absolutely, I do think that this case, and specifically this case, has caused men to reflect on their own behavior, on the behavior of their peers in a way that previous cases, for example, during the Me Too movement, have not. There's been a resistance, I think, primarily among men to take into account the true gravity of the situation. And I think here we have a very, very ordinary woman. We have 50 very, very ordinary perpetrators who are sort of in the broad sweep of society. You know, we've seen it said over and over again. They're between their 20s and their 70s. They're working class, they're middle class, they have jobs, they don't have jobs. They call him Mr. Everyman. And that has caused, yes, I hope, every man to analyze his own behavior.
And perhaps one of the particular difficulties in this case has been the internet as well, which of course really doesn't help in this kind of situation.
Absolutely. This is an example of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, is what we call it. Dominique Pelicot solicited these men on the internet to come to the home that he shared with Gisele Pelicot to commit these crimes. This was a specific forum designed essentially for this. So that is new. The idea of raping women who are sedated, that is not new. So it's a very, very old crime facilitated with new technology.
Just to finish for the moment, may change, of course, if we get more information coming in, but how much of a tip of the iceberg do you think this is? I mean, do you think in reality there are lots of other cases that are as serious as this, involving as many people, or do you think that that is very rare and most of the problem is more individuals within their own home?
Well, the problem is that we don't know, but what I will say is that we very, very easily could have never known about this crime. We found out about this because police arrested or they detained Dominique Pelicot for filming up the skirts of women in the supermarket. When they looked at his computer, they found a trove of these videos. So this crime could be continuing to this day if that hadn't happened. We have heard in court that Dominique Pelicot has been accused of showing other men how to do this to their own partners. There haven't been charges on that, but it has been brought up. So, yeah, I think this is absolutely a problem that goes very deep, and it is only by chance that we know about it. But thank goodness that we do know about it, and thank goodness Gisele Pelicot decided to have an open trial so she could really change the way we talk about rape in this country.